Hi, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Outreach Collective, it's my honor to welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining in. Both me and Bhakti are really excited to see the participation, the enthusiasm that the wider community has shown us towards our mission and vision as we find our way through the different challenges that we face as admissions and outreach professionals. Uh, One of the things that we quickly learned was that one of the major problems in our profession was that people were not having a platform to collaborate, or there was this lacuna where we were not having a direct line with our colleagues in schools and independent counselors, universities. I think that's one of the first things that we wanted to resolve with TOC. And now that we have resolved that, we have all of you here. Another thing that we want to talk about is the relevant issues to the community. And one of the most relevant and passionately debated issues for the last couple of days, at least in the WhatsApp group, was the testing policies of universities. I mean, coming from India, where we love our entrance examinations. You be it the IIT JEE or UPSC or medical entrance examination, and now we also have entrance examination for social sciences and commerce, and you know, coaching industry is a big billion-dollar industry in our country. So I think we also were discussing about the policies from a lot of universities in US and UK of being test optional, test blind, and maybe another test something something. So when I was writing up the form and I said test dot dot dot, I don't know what else there can be, but yeah, there are a lot of different opinions about what should be an admission policy. For me personally, I have always felt that, and I think most of us here who are passionate about our children or our applicants or students that we deal with, we feel when we say a child has to find a best fit university, I think the university also has to understand and adapt their admission processes to find that best fit candidate for them. It cannot be one standardized test which can solve all their problems, but I think it's economies of scale. When universities get more and more applicants, they find it difficult to sort out, better from the best. How do you define best? What is a best candidate? Is it always the topper that has achieved the maximum number of marks is the best candidate? I mean, my own personal experience with the Ashoka University and OP Jindal Global University, where I was heading their admissions and outreach department. I mean, we were very conscious, and I was working for liberal arts program. We were very conscious that it's not uh, the best in terms of academics that should make the cut. We were looking for more of a holistic profile. Now, when we said holistic profile, I thought it will solve most of my problems and we are doing something unique. But when I went to the schools, the kids told me that it's an additional problem for me because now you are asking more than academics, you're also asking for extracurricular. So now I have to work on my essay, and now I have to get another internship going. Now you have added two or three more things in my kitty to do apart from my entrance examinations. And especially I'm talking about the CBSE school kids in India who have this challenge, because in CBSE schools they have very limited opportunities to actually do pursue extracurriculars or internships or research projects and all those other things that probably other boards help students with. So I mean, I have my own opinions about this, and I strongly feel that to find the right kind of entrance examination or entrance requirement for a university is a pretty complex process which cannot be standardized. But I will stop here, and I would like to invite our first three speakers, and I'll encourage all of the community members here to come and speak after them. It's not only about us, three or four of us. It's all about all of us. So please feel free to unmute yourself. But to start the conversation, probably I'll first pass on uh, to Bhakti. Bhakti, my colleague and the founder at TOC. Bhakti, if you can take this conversation forward, please.
Yeah, hi. So thanks for that, Ankur. And I think what Adarsh and I think very knowingly touched upon was this whole conversation about, you know, what does a university that accepts or mandates, and it started with SAT, so I'm going to focus on that for now, from that perspective that, you know, a university that mandates an SAT score versus a university that does not mandate an SAT score? What does it say about the university? Because perception, and Adarsh is right, perception plays a huge role in this, because traditionally for decades, we've heard of universities asking for SAT scores. And then when universities stop asking for it or say it's optional, I think in the minds of parents and students, it naturally becomes like, oh, you're struggling for numbers, or your academic benchmarking is not as good, which is the reason why you're making test optional, which is why I don't blame people for having the perception of, the good universities still ask for test scores. But, the fact is that more and more top Ivy League universities as well are moving towards becoming test optional. They are not entirely confident how it's going to work, but they are definitely in an experimental zone. Um, from my perspective, or from Illinois Tech's perspective, I think so I had this conversation with our director of admissions last evening, because my locus standi to comment on this is still very limited compared to a lot of you who've been doing this for much longer. I've worked much more with Indian universities, so I'm just going to tell you what is factual, and what, from what I've researched and what I've understood in my own personal opinion, that socioeconomic backgrounds have an impact on test scores. And in order for universities to become inclusive and to expand and reduce entry barriers for applications, because if you talk to universities, applications are a metric of ROI. And therefore, to improve that ROI and to increase applications, as well as to reduce entry barriers for applications, to have students from Africa, or Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or remote parts of India, applying to them means much more than saying, okay, SAT is mandatory. It does throw up a whole set of challenges at the time of at the time of admission evaluation, and there is no doubt about it. So the challenges are a whole different ballgame on their own, which is, how do you determine a student's calcability, right? Especially when you're talking about international students, because contexts are different, pedagogies are different, curriculum is different. Therefore, for domestic students, they don't struggle so much because they usually get the AP scores. But for Indian students, it becomes a huge problem, or for international students, to determine academic rigor, and therefore the ability of that student to succeed in something like aerospace engineering or mechanical engineering in a university like IIT. It becomes difficult. So I will say this, and I'll stop here, because I think this is very important. It is not a black and white. It's not like test scores becoming optional are the best thing to happen to universities. At the same time, are they such a bad thing? No, they do solve certain problems of access. And university admissions have to really figure out a lot more on how we want to replace what that test score meant to evaluate a student, and how are you going to replace it, what is going to replace that. So that's something I don't think we've even gotten to yet in a lot of universities. So I'm going to pause there, and I think we'll just play ball. Ankur, if you're okay with it, like, I can pass on to
Yeah,
let
yeah. I think
yeah,
we should do that. Yeah, just
Adarsh,
an
go for
open
it.
session. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful conversation, standardized test and relevance. So where I come from is primarily, is around international students, right? Indian kids, Asian kids. And I've spent 15, 16 years in this space. So, the word standardized means how you are able to compare, different students from different backgrounds, right? I mean, and when it comes to academics, right, then there is a process of looking into 9, 10, 11, and 12, all 4 years, right? Now, in tier 2 cities and a lot of other schools, the academics are not standardized in terms of students doing not doing so well in grade 11. Grade 10 is going to 95%. Grade 12, again, a student is struggling. Some schools say that we don't want to give higher grades, right, in grade 11, primarily because we want the students to be serious about boards. So, multiple idea and multiple discussions led to an idea of having a standardized test where a student goes, takes a test, and the admission committee is able to compare what a student is scoring versus another. Secondly, what has happened post pandemic? The moment the standardized test went away or it went optional, went blind, then the number of applications really shot up, right? a really, really large increase in the number of applications. In fact, we had students coming in and saying, sir, now we can apply to Harvard. And Stanford is coming and saying in seminars that please apply, you never know, we just got a student. So, such a large number of applications, which automatically made the admission percentages decline, right? The admission percentage, acceptance percentage, which was 8%, 7%, has gone down to 3%, 2%. University of California, right? That was the first institution which sort of said that, okay, we are absolutely against the testing policy and we'll go blind. So they went blind. And then year two, so that is 2020, year two in 21, they put in an, within the form, they had an option of saying that you can put in the SAT score. So within the form, there was an option in 21, and in 22, again, they removed it. This entire transition made me reach out to a lot of UCs, right? To a lot of students, teachers, and admission committees, speaking with them. I was in California as well, went to colleges, spoke to institutions. What I realized that they were also very confused how to assess international applicants, and automatically they started giving a lot of weightage to, because it just the grades is just one parameter, right? From an evaluation point of view, which led to random decision making in terms of admission. Like a lot of quality kids did not get in, and students who had, let's say, now when it comes to socio-economic balance, right? I mean, students, I mean, we are hired as admission counselors, right? People pay us money, and then we obviously work with them. Similarly, tutors are hired to individual tutoring subjects for students to do well, right? So I mean, the whole socio-economic balance is valid for, I think, American kids solely. But from an international student standpoint, the UCs did not do a great job in terms of the evaluation process, and a lot of kids got into the process of waitlisting. So deferrals started happening just primarily because they were not being able to take a go at whether the score. So I'm not saying that SAT is the only solution, but then UC went ahead and said that 26, 27 we'll launch our own exam. Now that made me think that if SAT is what they want to do away with, then if they say that they want to launch a UC exam, which primarily made me think that, okay, is this primarily that 1 million users will, primarily take a UC exam and primarily they will get that dominance. With colleges, I feel that SAT evaluation is now, if you even look at the chat GPT, right now, that is defeating the whole purpose of the whole admission process, right? It's everything is in question. So what is quantifiable? What is something which is which can sort of be real time is the standardized score again, right? Also, I mean, we saw 17, 18, 19, lot of philanthropic manipulations happened in the admission, lot of athletic recruitments went wrong where people were paying large fees. That parent today, without the standardized test preparation, gets a more easier access, I feel, right? That because they have to just then manage the school grades and manipulate over there. So standardized testing was a way of comparing two students at a good level and seeing whether what their math and verbal ability is. And the, also it eliminated the whole idea of students applying everywhere, right? Which rose to the total number of applications. Each application costs $100+. For a family to spend so much money, $1,800 to $2,500 is just spent on application fees. So I mean, it's great for a university perspective, right? That yes, they are able to get that revenue, and which is great. But from a student parent point of view, I feel that the purpose was defeated. And even if you look at, I mean, in some of the articles, NYU went test optional, and University of Chicago also had a test optional policy. Now, what you have to understand that optional means that as an Indian applicant, like we are a test taking country, we are a test loving country. We love taking tests. Optional, matlab, bacha, the kid will take the SAT, right? Now, if I look at the 3-year data of international students who have got into NYU and Chicago, zero admits test optional, zero. Primarily, that again brought my attention that, okay, if they are saying test optional and they are not admitting any students with the test optional, idea, which means that they are definitely competitive edge is striking in. It's a competitive school. So if somebody else has one more data point to show, which is great, then the college's decision making becomes more easy. So, I mean, through the process, I feel that standardized test is an important part. If you can take it, great. If you cannot, there are other colleges which is meant for you to go. And finally, addressing on the final point, US cost of education is phenomenally expensive. Now I am in the point of, like my idea is that only if you can Only if you can go to a competitive school, get a certain scholarship, SAT is the play. And finally, SAT has played a role in terms of scholarships, right? Even at public universities, Illinois Institute of Technology has a lot of scholarships available for students. So are other colleges in public and private. So that defeats, like, merit-based scholarship is not going to happen if students is just going on the basis of academics in high school. And US cost of education is unaffordable for a middle class, right? It cannot go. Even the rich and the people with affordable backgrounds cannot pay at 3 crore today, right? I mean, that's exuberant amount. So unless you don't have a math, STEM, unless your cognitive reasoning is not strong, and SAT points your cognitive ability, right? Your cognitive ability is great. So one of the areas where I tell a student, okay, don't go for US, is primarily if I see that a student is struggling on the SAT, and I say that, okay, 1250 scholarship, you will probably struggle. Let's look at any other country, because spending 3 crores in the US is no ROI right now, especially if your cognitive and math ability is not strong. Having a standardized test as part of the process, and you see, finally SAT subject has got discontinued during pandemic, but AP has taken its space, right? So it's not that students aren't taking the test. Now students are taking AP. This year, all the IV admits I have seen, some of the students I have worked with, every single kid had an AP. Now there is no logic of Indian kids taking AP with an IB IGCSE 6 subjects, 4 APs they are taking, so the load is only going up, right? So I mean, I am not saying that I am anti SAT and SAT, like, or I'm for SAT, but students who can take it, I think there is a competitive advantage in terms of scholarship, because US interdisciplinary and the undergraduate experience is, I think, by far the most superior experience at any given college level, right? I mean, the top 200 also. I can't say that a 70th rank university will be better than an Ivy League, right? Primarily, they are both at a solid ground. So I mean, we've seen students and we've seen results, and yeah, I mean, the overall students with doing SAT has done well. Yeah, that's the point which I wanted to begin the discussion with.
Adarsh, we have to, Ankur, what do you think about this? TOC needs to collaborate with um, Collegify, and like we need to, I think, publish some kind of a research report on the impact of test optional. I mean, the data that you guys have is insane.
Absolutely.
I think, and even if you, I mean, just publish a report. We don't have enough reports
And
about what is going
and
on in our
others
space.
and others, I think it will help if you can just introduce yourself, the work that you're doing.
Yes.
I think not everybody will know that. It's
Yeah.
Okay.
phenomenal work that you do.
Right. So, guys, I have been in admission space by, I mean, just by passion. I am an entrepreneur with, interests in startups, ecosystem, investments, and Collegify is something where we work and limit ourselves to a very limited small category of students, right? So automatically, I'm known for, like, a lot of tier two, tier three cities, students coming in from. I got a Stanford Teacher Tribute in 2018 for exceptional teaching. A lot of kids got into Stanford, and they nominated me. I became a part of Forbes Business Council for standardizing a lot of things across Asia in the higher education space. And of course, I write for all the top journals on how to crack in. I think the value of unlocking scholarships has been an area of interest. And then 2017, we started working on tech, right? In terms of the whole making standardized test preparation quantifiable. So using the power of data analytics, data science, we collaborated from, IIT scientists and research background guys. And then we went ahead and we sort of we have a, I mean, a decent sizable number, but we don't teach SAT ourselves, because primarily that was not the area of B2C. We are primarily a software company, right, which sort of creates a software which makes learning more engaging, very powerful. Yeah, but I mean, each year we send hundreds of kids to top 50, top 100, top 200 schools across scholarships, 100% aid, funding, finances. And yeah, I mean, I started enjoying postgrad counseling. So I do the M7 ISBs and primarily the Whartons and the 2+2 masters and all of that. So limited capacity work, but yeah, I mean, just purely passion based.
How humble, huh? Limited capacity.
And I've been to Adarsh office in Delhi. I was there a couple of months back, and with, I mean, his walls are full of students that have he has placed full scholarships at top institutions. Very very privileged. Fewer, I mean, hardly one or two or three of students from India get those kind of scholarships, and he has done that kind of work. So phenomenal work, Adarsh, and he takes pride in that. work and totally student centric. So thank you, Adarsh, for all that you do. And it
Pleasure.
shows when you speak, we know that you are speaking with data, as Bhakti said. I mean, you have those numbers that nobody else has been able to give us. So thank you for so much.
Yeah.
So
Can we have
Megan, if
Megan
you
next? Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Early morning.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you guys. Early morning for me in the US, but this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So, a little bit about my background. I have worked in international admissions at US universities for 12 years now. So, in my time, I've read thousands and thousands of applications. I actually changed at my most recent institution. Within my first month, I changed our testing policies because of access and equity issues across the world. And now it's something that I actually consult with other universities across the US on their testing policies. So this is something that I talk a lot about, and I'm happy to share from the university perspective about what's going on, talk about some of these myths that we see floating around all the time and why we see them a lot as myths. So it's interesting that of course, the pandemic was what accelerated the test optional and test blind policy changes. But prior to that, there were actually a lot of universities that were already test optional and test blind, some that have been for 20 and 30 years. So this isn't new to the industry per se. And a lot of those institutions, I don't like to use rankings. I think rankings are arbitrary at best in itself. But because it is a data point that we could use, a lot of those universities do fall into the top 100, top 150 universities in the world, or in the US, pardon. So, seeing this acceleration are happening through the pandemic of what people have already known, the SAT causes more pressures on students and families in a way that makes it very difficult for many families to be able to afford it and to be able to have access to it. So it never has been a piece of data that we can actually compare two students together. It's never worked that way. Students come from very different backgrounds. A student could be coming from the same high school and have very different backgrounds. I think a lot of people who haven't necessarily worked in the enrollment management space talk about testing, it becomes in many ways a black and white and somewhat of a gray issue. And the reality is it's a whole rainbow of an issue in itself. Uh, Students from the same high school may have not just access to different types of classes, regardless of their curriculum, but even depending on the access that they get from their parents. If they're a first gen student, their parents may not know, uh, what the application process looks like to the US, or to other countries, what certain things actually matter in the application process, things like that, as well as students who may not live in an area where they have access to testing necessarily. One of the reasons when I started at my most recent institution that I immediately changed the policy to be test optional was because of the stories of students who had to give up so much money and days of their time to fly to other cities or to other countries just to get a seat at a testing center. The inequality that adds to an already stressful process is incredibly unnecessary. So, in that, I think it becomes the question that many parents then come to us and counselors come to us and say, well, if you don't have the test, what have you replaced it with? But the reality is, it's not being replaced with anything in the application. The way that I explain it to parents and counselors is that your application is a pie. It could be a pizza pie, a cherry pie, a chocolate pie, whatever your favorite kind of pie is. If you submit a test score, your test score is a piece of the pie. If you do not submit a test score, every other piece of the pie just gets a little bit larger because at the end of the day, whatever you're submitting for your application, it is a full pie that we are looking at. And so it is difficult right now a little bit to look at the data and to understand the data of what's going on. Like Adar's talked about the University of California system, but the reality with the state school systems, their primary role is to serve the students in their state first. They have to admit California students first before they look at anybody outside of California or outside of the US. They fall into the same group. So even with some of those numbers that get reported, you have to take them with a giant grain of salt because that is not the role of those universities. This is true with almost any state university in the US. The primary role why they were developed was to support that state itself. The other issue when it comes to data is we are seeing a lot of institutions who are traveling and recruiting again who we haven't seen on the road for 15 or 20 years. That is, the Stanford, the Ivy League, schools like that, making these promises of, well, we're test optional. You never know what's going to happen. When we also know that the only reason they're doing it is because they are loving their 2%, 3% admission rate right now because it looks good for them and it boosts their rankings, it boosts their status. So it's not necessarily about wanting to admit and support students. It's really about how can we keep these rates low going on, even if we go back to testing or anything like that. What I've heard from the few universities that have returned to having a standardized test, which we're talking about less than 5 in the US right now, of notable universities that have added testing back, it's honestly because they need a way to help support their application loads at this point. It does become an easier way for them to get rid of students easily out of their application piles because universities are having a crisis right now in terms of hiring and retaining employees. They do not have the employees right now to review applications at this load. And so nor do they have the funding to be able to hire enough people to read. So a lot of these institutions are looking at ways that don't necessarily mean that they're being the most equitable or care as much about access. It's really just how do we lighten this load as quickly and as easily as possible at this point. So I think there's a lot of different variables to it. I think one variable that we haven't talked about yet today is the mental health load of students who are not good test takers. This is another reason why test optional and test blind is important. We know it is a reality in almost every country right now that there is a mental health crisis among students from the age of 16 up to 22 and older than that, really, especially coming out of the pandemic, the level of anxiety, the testing anxiety that now exists, that we know that students may be a topper in the classroom, but they may go down to take a test and completely forget everything. And this is another way that it gives them a more equitable part of the application process. I think in some ways we don't necessarily see this quite as much in India just because it is such a test-taking society, right? Students are always taking exams from a very young age. This is a part of their life. But Darsh was talking about the students now who we see coming from IB or coming from the local curriculum also deciding to take 4 or 5 or 6 AP exams, which is actually the opposite of what they need to be doing right now. In my travels, especially in the last year to India, the number of students that I've talked to who've told me this, and I just look at them and say, you're honestly wasting your time taking these AP exams because the reality is the people who review the application, the people like me, in the US, we are experts of curriculums around the world, regardless if it's the Indian national curriculum, IB, A levels, anything like that. And what we would rather see instead of you spending your time studying and taking an AP exam is we'd rather see you passionate about things outside of the classroom. And I know this is then becomes another education piece for Indian students that they think, oh my gosh, that means I need to start my own company. I need to do 5 internships. I need to, cure the common cold, things like that. I say, stop. What we really want to see is that you find 1 or 2 things outside of school that you're passionate about and spend time doing that. Because most universities, we would rather admit that student who is volunteering at their local animal rescue and passionate about that over studying and just taking more exams that we already see their good scores elsewhere in their application. So
You're on mute, Megan, for some reason.
Megan, you went mute.
there we go. Can you
Yeah.
hear
And I
me?
think one quick comment. I mean, Indian students most of the time after schools are in coaching centers. So I mean that's why they are more
Right.
inclined towards, doing things that look good on their resume because that's what they have been taught since early ages to prepare and look good
Absolutely.
on university applications.
And I think these things, and every region has their own challenges with this right now, because one of the biggest challenges to get over is parents and the culture that parents have created, where this is what was important when they went to university, maybe, 15, 20 years ago. But things have changed, and these changes are not going to happen in the culture overnight. This is going to be a slow shift of trying to get families to understand what are the most important things in the application process. What is going to make my student and my child most valuable through this process, not just for admission, but also for scholarships.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much for that very informative piece perspective from US. I will now, I'm conscious of the time. I'll also like to invite our other speakers. I don't think we have pre-assigned speakers as of now. I think you three were the only ones. Uh, Harshita, I
No,
see your hand is.
we have Smriti, and I think we
Smriti
had,
is there.
yeah,
So
Smriti is
Smriti,
here. So
you want to
Smriti,
go
we
first?
need to hear from Smriti.
And then we'll go to Harshita. Is there anybody else that had nominated themselves? Sorry if I'm missing out somebody. I think Smriti was there. Smriti, you want
And
to share something?
Charu.
Smriti, you can go ahead and then we go to Charu. We can't hear you. You're on mute. Bhakti, you're on mute.
आप म्यूट पे हो स्मृति, कुछ बोल दीजिए.
We can't hear her.
नहीं.
We can go to Charu. Charu, you
आप
can go ahead.
fix कीजिए स्मृति. We are going to Charu and then we're coming right back to you. We can't hear you, Baba.
I don't think I
Yeah.
have anything. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Adarsh has said it all, frankly speaking, and after hearing Megan's perspective also, everything has been said. And as was being shared in the group also, it all depends on so many factors. So over the years, I think I've also come across some amazing students who do not give the SAT and still make it to top universities. And there are some others who actually give the SAT, struggle with 3 attempts and try to touch that 1500 mark and still struggle to get that admission. So at the end of the day, yes, we need to, I think, I love the analogy of the pie, Megan. And so that analogy of the pie just holds true. If you've not been able to give the SAT, if this is something that has not been part of your subset or your experience, then I think students need to be made comfortable about dealing with other aspects of their application. And I think over the years, I've also now spent close to a decade on working with students and helping them to connect to top colleges, universities, and scholarships. And last 3 years alone has been $60 million in scholarships. So one sees that the trend is not exactly, at least my data shows that the trend is not exactly pointing towards an SAT score alone. I think the bigger picture here has to be, how do you curate a good college list? I often find that, especially students who are reaching out to independent counselors and even at schools, while they may come to you with a wish list of Ivy League universities and so many other top colleges, this is what I want on my list. I think the role of a counselor also here is to, of course, don't burst their bubble. Everybody can aim for top universities and colleges, but at the same time, give them this reality check. There are a lot of data points available out there. One of the things I like to do sometimes with my students is take them to, like I was recently having this chat with a student who said, Wharton is where I want to be. And I said, okay, let's look at the class profile of, last year at Wharton, and what does that look like? What is your GPA and what's your percentage and what is your profile and how does it match up with so many others? And he immediately pointed out, I need to work on my grades, I need to do this and I need to do that. The idea is to allow students this intelligent dialogue to arrive at a great mix, whether it's the mix of a profile that includes research or internships or volunteer projects and so many other things. And then, of course, if you see that, yes, indeed, your scores are not matching up to the kind of scores that this university is aiming for, then do encourage them and say that, do you want to try and give the SAT? Because then it can be one of the things that the university can look into. But other than that, I don't think standardized testing should be standardized and it should not be just like a part of something that we advise students to give just because it's out there. It is each each student, each family, and we just need to take it as it's so the way I like to tell students is that at the end of the day, you need to make them see who you really are. And it is tough. And if you don't want to come across as one more student from India, then you will need to do something unique with your profile at the end of the day. And those are things where some interesting conversations can take place. Of course, we know that today's students are doing all kinds of crazy things, right, from setting up projects to research, and they're taking up all this load. But I think, Megan, you're absolutely right. It just has to be about those simple things. I even tell them that even if you've been able to work with your sibling, or just help with your grandparents, or just work a small activity, which could be planning a special birthday for your best friend. It's how you do certain things and how do you project that on your college application. That's what does the trick. I've had students with 1350 getting into a UC Berkeley. Yeah, I've had 1250s also getting into a Kelley Business School. So it's possible. Okay. So the idea has to be, again, this whole curation of the pitch, which I think we as counselors need to work really hard on.
Perfect. Thanks, Charu. And quickly, if you can just introduce yourself to the larger group, because I mean, not everybody will know you also.
Okay, sure. So my name is Charu Shila. I'm the founder, director, and key mentor at University Connection. And I've been working in the college planning career guidance space for over a decade. Before this, I was the head of admissions for the London School of Economics Affiliate Center here in New Delhi. And I love working with young students. I'm also an international ACAC member. And I think had some great association with some people in this room. And we work not only on undergrad applications, but also a number of postgrad applications. So I think the toughest applications we've handled are LLM applications. So we do a lot of those, LLM, MBA, MIM programs. We're one of the few in the country that have done a lot of LLM applications, actually. And I think
perfect. Charu,
no,
perfect.
everybody.
Can I quickly invite Smriti? Smriti, can you check? You can unmute yourself. We can't hear you again. So some issue with your
Smriti, join from your phone, Baba. Join from your phone. Maybe that will be easier. Huh?
But quickly, I'll move on to Harshita. Harshita, you
Yes.
had some comment or question you wanted to make. I mean, you're waiting for a long time.
Hello everyone, good evening. I am Harshita and I am a PhD student at NIPA. NIPA is National Institute of Education Planning and Administration. So for my thesis, I am trying to understand pathways to higher education with a special reference to franchisee tutoring institutions. So I think you saw my head nod very well when Ankur said that most of the students after school are actually at these coaching centers getting coaching, and ranging from coaching to edtech. Now I think the center becomes the periphery and the periphery becomes the center, where the center is the formal schooling system, whereas the periphery is the standardized coaching institutions that coach students. So I think one very important factor that we are missing here is that merit, that we give so much importance to merit does not exist in vacuum. It is a sum of our already existing benefits that we have coming from a strong economic socio-cultural background. So I think when we do not give our students that window wherein they can express themselves in different ways, so say for example I'm very keen on understanding how these students who are not coming from very privileged backgrounds get to good universities. That is something that really interests me. So there's this student I was talking to the other day from Sarvodaya Vidyalaya who wants to go to Sarvodaya Vidyalayas, for those who do not have the reference, are government schools. And to understand how they want to pitch in to go to universities abroad, or to go to liberal arts universities like, say for example, OP Jindal, or even Ambedkar for that matter. They are not able to create that profile, and they are not able to get to perform very well in standardized tests. but they are, if we give them a scope where just a number of the standardized test, the marks that they get is not their means to get into the university, it is easier for them, by creating that profile. So right now, when um, ma'am was talking about the basic idea that how you project yourself is something that really changes the game. So I think standardized tests to a large extent, yes, for a university it makes it definitely easier, because it says, okay, score above this, okay, tick, okay, you're ready to go, you can come for an interview. But for students who do not have those resources, who do not have access, who do not have that social cultural capital, for them standardized testing is actually a barrier. And if we want to emphasize, like Megan was saying, the equity aspect of it, the inclusion aspect of it, then it's very important that our students get that scope where they can create a portfolio. I just want to give an example of GNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. The earlier practice that they used to have is they used to create portfolios where they used to give marks for various aspects. So if a child comes from a disadvantaged background, the region, the religion, the gender, they had marks for all of this. So I think it's very important for universities, even abroad, to see that the kind of social cultural atmosphere that the child comes from when they give admissions, because the kind of resources that they had. The other day I was in a UN volunteers event, and I could see that students coming from slums and all, how they projected themselves to be able to say, okay, I did this is how I got
Got your point. Yeah.
I taught teachers, and I taught teachers to teach better, so things like that. So I just want to say that merit is not a vacuum. We just can't say marks is enough to say that this child is meritorious. So yeah.
Done. Thank you so much, Harshita, and we resonate with you in that aspect. I think there is a lot of work that is being done, and there is a lot of work that is still needs to be carried out in that space. Agree with you. But Neeraj, you have a point. You want to go in now?
Yeah, Ankur, I just want a quick point from you, basically, because you've been associated with Ashoka also, who accepts SAT. So, what is the Indian context of the SAT score? I think that would add some value to the group.
So in Ashoka, we were pretty clear. I mean, we accepted SAT, we also accepted ACT, we also accepted our own aptitude test. So it's called Ashoka aptitude test. So it's not mandatory for a student to give SAT or ACT. Even if you don't have a SAT, ACT score, you can give an aptitude test, which is easily accessible. A student can give it from their own homes. I mean, it's AI enabled now during COVID times. So, I mean, it's not mandatory. And when my colleague Harshita was mentioning about disadvantaged backgrounds, students applying to a university, and university should be conscious of their backgrounds and should take that as one of the factors. I mean, we Ashoka used to do that. I mean, if a student used to come from a little disadvantaged background, we used to have proper checks and balances in place to ensure that we take that into account. Special outreach was made to, and they still made it in made in Ashoka to government schools, to Jawahar Navodayas, and I'm sure one of my colleagues from Ashoka, if he or she is here, can talk about it more. But Ashoka was very, I mean, I used to head their international outreach, where we used to specially go to not only in India but outside India. I mean, in Africa, we recruited a lot of students on full scholarships. And in South Asia, we went to schools where nobody used to go, and we went there. We signed up an MOU with the Bhutanese government to get Bhutanese children on full scholarships to Ashoka. I mean, liberal arts institutions have been doing some phenomenal work, and I think more needs to be done, but much has also been done.
Adarsh, your daughter is so cute. You should let her come on screen.
Hmm.
But having said that, I'm just going to back this up with another comment. Even CREA, for example, allows or accepts SAT scores, and I was with CREA before this. So just very quickly from an Indian context, does it have an impact on your applications? Not really. Does it? There is a college board scholarship, which is a $2,000 scholarship. So for every student that gets a certain score and above, I don't remember the exact score now, but it's definitely above 1,300, but something above that is eligible for a $2,000 scholarship if the Indian university gives you the admission, and you achieve that score, and you accept that admission, then you're eligible to get $2,000 from College Board. So that is the one USP. But honestly, SAT does not have, I think, remotely any impact on admissions to Indian universities, at least not that I know of. So yeah. I think Ashima had raised her hand. I think we should go to Ashima. Ashima, you still here with us? Let's get a. Oh, Smriti. Wait, Smriti, are you here?
She's here, but
Ashima, just
can
one
we hear
second.
her?
Smriti is
That's
Can
the
I
trying to
question.
talk
now,
to.
am I now audible? I
Yes.
am unmute.
Finally, time to celebrate.
Oh, don't
Go
say
for
this.
it.
This is bad.
Chalo,
Right.
Okay, so just
Smriti.
very quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
Smriti
good.
is place has. I'm just going to introduce you. The reason is Smriti is a very interesting person because she was a counselor with the CMS school in Lucknow. I don't know exactly which branch because I'm very confused between Gomti Nagar and the other one, but Smriti
Gomti
will
Nagar,
tell
Gomti Nagar.
Gomti Nagar. And it's a massive school. It holds like a Limca record for the largest number of students, etc. in Asia. So it's a huge school. And Smriti was a counselor there for the longest time. And now, very recently, she's the other side of the table where she's heading outreach for Vijay Bhumi University. So she's seen both the school and the university perspective. So Smriti, we'd love to hear from you more as a counselor about your take on SATs.
So I'll take a little time, not more than a minute, to take you to the history of SAT. I don't know how many of us are really aware that why was the SAT created and why did it actually start, right? Now, why do I actually want to start from that particular point is that, the whole debate will come down to a big zero when we actually know what's the relevance of the test, and where did it actually start. So I mean, it started back then when Army Alpha test started. That was the first of its kind, which is coined as the first test, which is the first aptitude test which was ever developed by any agency. And the Army Alpha test was basically a test where it was an entry point to provide equal chances. That was the basic platform on which this test was created, that we go beyond. Back then in 1900s, it was, when it comes to the part of whether knowledge and education was accessible, whether it was equally given. We know a lot of issues were going back then in the world. So the Army Alpha test was completely taken up by some few students, out of which Brigham was one of the most famous from Harvard University. And what he did was he kind of like, put through a little changes and incorporated a completely new test which was called as SAT. Now, the purpose of SAT was to bring chances and opportunities to children and students who were not privileged to get the education in the so-called good schools of US. So the purpose of SAT was to bring that chance to the students, right? That's the entire structure of the test where it was created. Same was the Army Alpha test. The beta test came on later on. I won't talk about that. But the test which was taken, and the purpose of SAT was this, that, while the students are transitioning from schools to higher education, they should get a fair chance. And when we say that if a child is homeschooled, and if a child is not privileged to go to a private school, because most of the kids who used to go for higher ed at that time were from the private schools. So what about the schools which are run by state government or the so-called federal government? How do we provide them that equal chance? That was the relevance of creating SAT. Now taking that point to the next part. After creating this test, they were basically, you won't believe that there were parts of Greek, Latin, and even literature. I mean, there were many sections which started cutting. There was a point of time where there were about 300 questions which were to be solved in about 90 minutes. So the difficulty level of SAT was also curated over the period of time. It was difficult at the earlier times, and it is by the book, it has been decreased. The difficulty level has been decreased. Now, why am I bringing this thing? when it comes to the context of a child who is appearing from the Indian boards, I'm particularly talking about the CBSE and the ICSE here, because my overall experience is more with the Indian boards and lesser with the IB boards. There's a point which they want to cover there, so why this again, coming to that part where they want to cover up those points, that okay, I belong to a national board, I might not be having the so-called other aspects when it comes to the academic aspect of it. So generally what used to happen at my school was that the kids, even if a child is scoring a 98, I had seen country toppers in my schools, like 99.75 kind of a score. I've seen that score. And I've also seen college offers to these kids who've scored such, I mean, such golden scores. I can't believe how did they score that, but yes, they've scored that. So to that mindset where they used to come, I used to keep on telling that it has gone test optional. But as Megan also said and Adarsh also said, that why was it done, we know what was behind their mind. But for a kid who's coming from the Indian boards, the basic thought process was this, that I want to cover those many brownie points on my application, and I want to give the SAT and score higher marks, so that when it again comes to the wholesome aspect of it, I am not lagging behind. That was one of the reasons. And I mean, a lot of kids used to give SATs at least twice or thrice, and yeah, obviously the scores used to be good. But my entire context here to bring the history of SAT was just this, that imagine a test which was created to create equity and more accessibility is actually, has gone completely in a different direction, where it has become absolutely inaccessible, and it is not creating any equity at all. It's in fact creating parities instead of creating equities. It's completely, it's creating different zones where people can actually identify, this is that. We all know that how many 1250s and how many 1350s or how many 1400s will make to which colleges. I mean, out of the numbers that we actually juggle, we know how many must have made it, we know inside our hearts, right? So I mean, as educators, I think we do hold this as a responsibility, that equity should be, I mean, the test that was created for this kind of opportunity should be actually taken. I mean, we should take the baton ahead and kind of like, create that opportunity for our students. Where, I mean, Adarsh is saying, like Ankur said, that, we are able to provide these kind of opportunities. So, I mean, whenever a kid used to come for this, I mean, I would request all of you here that there are a lot of options now which College Board has given to go for that fee waivers. Try to use them as much as possible to your capability, that you can actually give those fee waivers to your students somehow or anyways. I used to write a lot of letters to College Board that my kids need those fee waivers, right? So that was the entire I mean, I just wanted to add that bit where I wanted to bring the history of SAT to our knowledge, that the test which was created for such a reason should be actually should actually
Yeah.
hold that testimony now. Yeah, that's
Just a
from my
quick question. What you said, and thanks for that, Smriti. What you said, and I want to ask Megan and you the same question parallelly. How much does it cost to enroll in a SAT prep course in India and in the US? Like, what's the average cost? Anyone would have any information about this or can Google it. Because I tried Googling it, but
Yeah, I
Mania
think
Instant does not give the prices on their website, and you have to really like search.
no.
Any
In
kind of
a in
test
a
prep? Sorry.
in a country like India, it starts from about 2.5 lakhs to to a short-term course of 50,000 rupees. What? Don't open your mouth like this. Don't do this. Don't get scared. This is truth. And others also would agree. And it might go higher. It will not be less. What do you say, others? It's not
So,
going
Others,
to be less.
Smriti, I agree with all the points you make, that College Board came with the ethos of not making it equitable. See, but that implies on any testing area. Yeah, SAT. I know a tutor who charges $1,000 an hour in the US. He's in New York, and when I met him, I just met him because I wanted to see his face, and I wanted And understand. But, he told me that Adarsh, my model works because people pay that premium and they feel happy. And my crowd is like that, right? So, it is us who, and, the parents and the whole fear of missing out. And that's pretty much applicable to all the factors. Like, you look at IIT JEEs, what's happened?
Yeah.
Like, it's a bloodbath out there right now in the Indian testing. Where physics wala versus, the fit Gs, and they are going crazy, right? Hiring tutors. Tutors are getting paid $10 million in salary, right? I would quit everything and doing and become an IT tutor right now. So primarily, what fundamentally, and yes, Smriti is right that if you don't ask, you will not get. Students in India don't ask for a aid. They don't ask for wave offs. They don't say, right? All they come and say that, what can I do? Right. And the parent also is that, what is the, how can, there is, they're not trained to be able to write an email. Let me be as honest
Yeah.
as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So if the American institution, it's not their fault, right? What Megan is saying, like primarily, and I agree with most of the points she makes, right? That it's very unfair on the grounds of students who are unable to pay the tutors such expensive premium fees and things like that. So it is the ecosystem which is destroying, and primarily that has created such a imbalance in the process of admission. India is going to send 25 lakh applications in 2024, right? I don't think itna to, there is not so many jobs only, right? In terms of
Bilkul.
the US. So where is the 80 billion is what is going to be spent in the abroad industry. So it's like, it's crazy, right? I mean, the fees is going almost, it's going to touch 100K any moment, I feel, right? NYU's of the world have touched 85,000 dollars a year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there has to be ways of, breaking down the problem and addressing, and there has to be ways of sort of method using, intelligence and not emotion in the admission decision making, I think.
Thanks for that, Adarsh. And Megan, very quickly. So, what is the average cost of SAT prep? And then we go to Ashima.
So, very much what Adarsh just said, that there are people who charge upwards of $1,000 or more an hour for the private tutors. Thankfully, there are free options like Khan Academy and other online virtual options for students to do it for free. The problem is the families that come from middle class and higher in the US don't view that as good enough prep necessarily. So they're willing to pay thousands of dollars for either a course, virtual or in person, or for private tutors for just testing alone.
So, it's classic consumer behavior that the more
Absolutely.
expensive something is, the better it is. Fair
Absolutely.
enough. Fair enough. And Ashima, welcome. Finally, it's your turn. We'd love to hear from you. Ashima, just quickly introduce yourself and tell us your view.
Hi, Ashima. I'm the head of Career and College Guidance Counselor with Candor International School. I have spent a good amount dealing with kids, whether as an independent counselor as well as a school counselor, I would say, and I can give you both perspectives, basically. So I heard everyone talking over here, and I like to just sum it up and then put my point. Socioeconomic background, of course, universities are looking at that. Standardized testings for the privileged, of course, we all know. A piece in the pie, like Megan said, yes, but people do want to put that extra piece of pie, the egg, the excellent SAT scoring that they get in their applications, so to score an acceptance or a offer of place from top league of universities. Because at the end of the day, we need to understand the Indian psyche. Now, when we talk about universities, students applying to US colleges, we need to understand that they come under the international quota, where Indian students probably would be landing about 1%. Correct me if I'm wrong. And over there, fighting for a seat or an offer of place is quite difficult for them. And in India, it's like fear of missing out, like Adarsh said. If parents feel that my child is not applying to an Ivy League university or so-called brand name university, then it's not good enough. Why am I spending crores just to send my kid abroad to a university where when I can send my kid to VIT, MIT, or any other institute, right? So preparing for SAT is similar in India to sending kids to, dummy schools in Kota for 2 years. Imagine it is going to come to that level. Trust me. Like everybody said, 25 lakh applications, it is going to come to that level if things don't change up, if universities don't change their mindset in terms of that they do not need this universal scale to evaluate international applicants in terms of their academic rigors, and why more and more students are actually taking APs and so said, with IB, is because I have seen myself Ivy League universities and highly selective universities actually selecting people on the basis of, okay, you have IB, 3HL, 3SLs. What more have you done academically? Have you taken AP psychology? If not calculus, have you taken AP economics? Do you have, if a child wants to go for a STEM program, do you have a knowledge in social sciences or social studies? Do they really need that? No, but they want to create a very diverse class. So this is what they're looking at, universities. And I can just out of experience tell you, once I was, I'm not going to name it, but I was speaking to one of the admission officers from a very highly selective university, and in a candid conversation over a cup of coffee, she mentioned that, see, if we are selecting or evaluating an application from a metropolitan city, we understand that they have the money as well as the resources to get themselves involved in SET prep or activities or internships and all. But then the same thing, when we are doing it from smaller towns or cities like Kanpur, Raipur, or other places, we look at overall holistic application, and over there we may not see SAT or ACT because they don't have the privilege of getting over there. So universities at a standpoint are looking at both the things, and we need to understand, when we are sitting in metropolitan cities, what is more beneficial for them. So I am neither pro nor against the SAT thing, but what I'm trying to say over here is that we cannot make it optional. Optional would not work. Either blind or keeping it would work. If it is test optional, then as others said, that 25 lakh applications, just imagine the ROI that universities would be getting from the application fee. That's it. So from that point of view, rather than thinking whether to eliminate, suggest, not suggest, I think we need to compensate. What is it that students should do to eliminate this testing factor, which is something that smaller city kids are doing, involving themselves in activities. And even though we do understand that internships is not very common for Indian students, we need to probably, at a university level, all Indian universities, we probably need to have more and more programs where students are getting engaged in activity and skill-based things, just like the US, where they are gaining some credit out of it. They are learning skills that are more complex in nature. They are gaining cognitive flexibility, adaptability, social responsibility, all of these things. So that is what they can showcase in their applications, along with what they're studying in school curriculum wise, rather than telling them take SAT, don't take SAT. Because if that factor is not there to overshadow their SAT scores or their academic rigors, we may not be able to reach to the point where we want to, basically.
Oh my God, so many points made that I mean, they're incredible. I mean, point number one, right? Like, I mean, there are universities that are making off money off the application fee, simply by removing the entry barrier. But like universities like Illinois Tech, we don't charge a single dollar in application fee, right? Like we have zero application fee. So we're not even gaining from that perspective. So that's a question that I'm going to ask my director of admissions, that, okay, what is the point of this? But I know there's a deeper thought behind what Illinois Tech is trying to do. It is genuine inclusivity, because the city of Chicago has a lot of history in terms of being able to serve the underprivileged of the city, and Illinois Tech has been the helm of doing that. So I know they come from a very different mindset. They come from a very Christian charity mindset, and therefore it's translated into all the policies that have come in so far. The second point that you raised was, the whole brand fascination that Indian parents have, of course, and students have. I think it's worth having another conversation. Maybe next town hall can be about that. Is there are a lot of universities that have spent millions of dollars on marketing, but that does not make them the best universities. But because they are such recognizable brand names as a result of that, it's classic marketing. Marketing does not mean quality, but the point is that's human behavior, that when we see some more of something, we associate it as being the go-to option for an XYZ category. So I feel like it's worth a conversation about how do parents really rationalize what is a good college to apply to, and not just because you've seen it 100 times everywhere. but what else do you need to do as a family to research how good that college really is for your aspirations and your child's aspirations? So that's maybe a conversation we can have. And the third point that you made about the responsibility of universities to prepare students further from a profile building perspective in general. I think more and more universities are looking at that, but I'm finding that Indian universities are finding it very difficult to implement it. A lot of international universities already have summer programs and internships, etc. But Illinois Tech does too. But in India, I see that that's not really happening. So that's another conversation as well. But yeah, I mean, I think, well, look, we're at 7:40. I'm happy to talk for another 30 minutes, but the point is I know everybody has a life. So
Yeah.
Ankur Vora, welcome back. We missed
My daughter
you.
is already here. She's after my life. She's like, it's your
Well,
time to play with me. So I
say
have to
hi
go.
to Pari, a big hi to Pari.
She was asking
Everyone,
for you.
Pari's birthday is on the 5th of Feb, right? 5th of Feb is Ankur's daughter's birthday. Don't forget to wish him. And I just want to say that this has been such an incredibly enriching experience for me as someone who's just entered the US university outreach space. It's been so enriching for me. And I think Ankur and I will be in touch with a lot of you to figure out more avenues and ways of creating awareness, not just within universities, but also with parents and students on how do you identify best fit, etc., etc. And Adarsh, I cannot. I mean, the last word has to be that thank you for starting this conversation. It was, it's been phenomenal. And Ashima, from your perspective, think about what do counselors need, in terms of clarity from universities, and we'll try and get more American universities on board for a further conversation with the TOC counselor members. So yeah, Ankur, over to you.
No, thank you so much, Bhakti. I think fantastic conversation as I had imagined it will be. A lot of good points made for everyone. I mean, thank you to all the speakers, especially you, Adarsh, and Megan, and Smriti, and Ashima made some very good points. Charu was there too. Harshita, thank you for making your points. I mean, all of us, I think, had a very substantial and good last hour spent. So I'll let everybody go, but not before we have our ritual of having a selfie. So anybody who wants to have we call it a laptop selfie or something like that. I mean, you can switch on your cameras, we can have it. But I already have a couple of them with me, but
Come on,
anybody
guys.
else who wants to
Come on,
join in,
camera. Come on, come on, come on.
please
Yeah,
come
switch on
on
your
camera
camera.
and we can have a selfie together and we'll shine on our TOC LinkedIn page. So here goes my na, don't tell me कि अच्छा selfie नहीं लिया आपने. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. And remember, it's still Tuesday. It's not Friday or Saturday. So you have the whole week
Take
ahead.
one more, Ankur. We have few more people who come on camera. I think Mr.
Chalo,
Shea,
let's have one more. I have
Anupama.
lot of, yeah.
Yeah.
Come. Anybody else wants to join in, please switch on your
Yeah.
camera. We have 30
Give it 30
seconds.
seconds. Puneet, oh my God, you're driving. Don't do this. Be safe. What are you doing?
Somebody wants to
You're
dress
on
up.
mute. Never mind. Go for it.
Yeah, my wife
Ankur.
is holding Bhakti. Thank you. No problem.
Okay.
Chalo, see, committed TOC members from car also they're listening to us. See?
Awesome.
Chalo, I'm taking the final selfie. Let's do that. Smile.
Smiling.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a
You guys.
great evening. Bye bye. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye.
Guys.
Yes, sir, I'm sleeping today.